The Middle East watches with anticipation as the White House meeting between President Donald Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu concludes, with leaders and observers alike looking for signals of what may come next. During the talks, Netanyahu urged Trump to adopt stricter measures against Iran's missile and nuclear program. Trump, meanwhile, said he pressed for continued negotiations with Iran, but warned that the United States may take action if a new nuclear deal is not reached. The meeting follows indirect nuclear negotiations between Washington and Tehran in Oman and comes amid growing concerns about the potential for a broader regional conflict. Across the region, the question remains, will diplomacy prevail or will rising tensions escalate into war? I'm Maham Morsi. Welcome to In Depth. Axios reports that the U.S. President Donald Trump reiterated after a 3-hour meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that he prefers to continue pursuing a diplomatic deal with Iran rather than moving towards military action for now. While Trump described the talks as very good, Netanyahu remains skeptical about diplomacy and is more inclined to support military strikes against Iran. The two leaders have previously issued divergent public statements before coordinating closely during Israel's June attack on Iran. The U.S. and Iran recently resumed talks in Oman, even as Washington is reinforcing its military presence in the region, with Trump warning that he could send an additional aircraft carrier strike group if negotiations fail. Trump said he pushed for continued negotiations but warned that outcomes remain uncertain, urging Iran to act reasonably and responsibly. Netanyahu's office emphasized Israel's security concerns and ongoing coordination with Washington, while Gaza and broader regional developments were also discussed. According to the New York Times, Trump said his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Iran produced nothing definitive, though he reiterated his preference for continuing negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program. Trump emphasized that he favors a diplomatic deal, but warned that failure to reach an agreement could lead to unpredictable outcomes, and emphasized that he favors diplomatic deals. Netanyahu advanced his Washington visit to address the ongoing U.S.-Iran talks, which Israel views as an existential security issue, particularly due to Iran's nuclear ambitions and ballistic stockpiles. The meeting comes amid heightened regional tensions following Iran's internal unrest, a harsh government crackdown, and a U.S. military buildup in the Middle East. Recent indirect talks in Oman made little progress, with Washington demanding limits on enrichment, missiles, and Iran's regional proxies, while Tehran insists negotiations focus solely on its nuclear program. Netanyahu has pushed for a broader agreement, while Trump continues to oscillate between diplomatic outreach and threats of military action.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu concluded their latest White House meeting, the 7th since Trump's re-election. The leaders spent nearly 3 hours discussing Iran's nuclear file, Tehran's missile program, and security challenges for Israel. Netanyahu reportedly urged Trump to take a hard line on Iran, pressing for limits on ballistic missiles and other strategic capabilities. Trump emphasized the importance of enforcing the ceasefire in Gaza brokered last year, while warning that a good deal with Iran must include no nuclear weapons or missiles, without providing further details. Trump also said he insisted talks with Iran continue during the meeting with Netanyahu, but warned he may take action against Tehran if a nuclear deal is not reached. According to sources, the U.S. is considering sending a second aircraft carrier strike group to the region as part of a major military buildup. Both leaders also discussed the potential for military action against Iran if diplomacy fails. The meeting comes amid high tensions following indirect nuclear talks in Oman, which both Washington and Tehran described as positive. As the region braces for the outcomes, analysts question whether diplomacy can hold. Does the high-level meeting between Trump and Netanyahu signal a potential breakthrough with Iran? Or is Israel using it to push Washington toward escalating tensions with Tehran?
To talk to us more about the possibilities here, we're joined from Washington by Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and a political analyst, and Fedi Heleni, senior fellow at the National Council for U.S.-Arab Relations. Thank you both for joining me here on In Depth. Okay, Ginger, let's start off with you. Now, with the White House meeting between Trump and Netanyahu concluding, how do you assess the impact of Netanyahu's push for missile restrictions on the U.S.-Iran negotiations?
Well, first, Reham, thank you for having us today, and greetings to your viewers and to your other guests. And, well, what we are seeing is that Netanyahu and the American Zionists, both Christian and Jewish Zionists, are very alarmed. Netanyahu has becoming increasingly desperate after the failure of the December protests to result in a strike against Iran on January 14th. We know now that was the original plan. And at the same time, we see that President Trump himself is trapped between his fear of a greater war with Iran and the demands of Netanyahu, the war hawks in Congress, and his big money Israeli lobby donors. Trump did say in his Truth Social post after his meeting with Netanyahu that nothing definitive had been decided, that he prefers negotiations, and he also did mention to Axios that Iran is desperate for a deal. They would be foolish not to accept a favorable agreement. However, this is actually President Trump's position. We know that our more restrained generals have been advising him that we cannot put boots on the ground. Our military capabilities are limited. Our massive armada that Trump brags is offshore Iran actually has to stay 1,000 miles offshore, because any closer, they become within target range of Iran's anti-defense missiles. So it turns out we are not in a position to be able to strike deep into Iran, to be able to reach Tehran with our naval power. This limits us only to air operations, which are not effective in enacting regime change. We also see increasing pressure from the foreign minister Fidan of Turkey, because Turkey is becoming aware that after any hostilities with Iran, Israel wants to target Turkey next over their conflicts in Syria, and because Israel views all of their neighbors in the Middle East as a threat to them, they will never be satisfied until every country around them is in ruins. So Trump is being backed into a corner. He needs a way out. We did see Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi made a press interview. He gave an interview where he said that he is willing to make a nuclear deal with President Trump, that he can offer President Trump a better deal than Obama got in 2015 with the JCPOA. This is very effective. This could give Trump a way out, a way to declare a win, because one of the criticisms he is getting at home is that if he agrees to something that was what Obama got, then he is no better than Obama, And our war hawks are using the Obama card. They're playing the Obama card as an insult to Trump to get his ego to respond with belligerence. We also know that China and Russia have been bolstering Iran's defenses. So Iran is a much more formidable foe than they were last June. And also, the pressure from Israel is becoming intense. They have upped their propaganda, the Hasbara, about protesters in Iran. They say the protests are starting up again. They're becoming violent. This is to try to replay conditions to lead up to a strike against Iran. However, this is not succeeding because the American people are becoming upset and angry with Trump. They do not want another endless war. Trump is heading into midterm election season. If he starts a war with Iran now, this could destroy his Republican Party chances of retaining any control of Congress. If he loses control of Congress, he will be a lame duck. He will be subject to impeachment. And moreover, the American people are also angry because our trade and tariff wars, our sanctions, embargoes, our increasing tariffs against countries that do business with Iran, with Russia, are increasing the costs to American consumers, American businesses. If Iran closes the Straits of Hormuz, we will have gas and energy inflation on top of tariff price inflation. And our economic situation is fragile enough that this would be devastating to Trump heading into the midterms.
Okay, Fedi, let's get your take here. Now, Trump described the closed-door meeting as very good, yet there was no acknowledgement of any major decisions that took place during this meeting. How do you see this? Do you think that Netanyahu basically accepted the perspective of Trump, or is this just a way, I suppose, to not give out a substantive sort of point about what happened behind the closed doors, so that whatever happens next is sort of a surprise, I suppose, for Iran?
Yes, good morning, first of all, Rihama, and thank you very much for having me, and greetings to your esteemed guest as well. If we use the term accept, that means we are building on a presupposition that there is a disagreement in the first place between President Trump and Netanyahu. And while I see that there are differences in their opinions, of course, in the sense that President Trump wants to give chances for diplomacy, while Benjamin Netanyahu sees that the two theaters, Gaza and Iran, are not yet ripe at this stage for diplomatic work, and there is military action needed. President Trump, in that sense, we know that he has this always principle, peace through strength. But in his opinion, he's showing strength and deterrence through the military, the U.S. military assets in the region, and the fact that these negotiations with Iran are happening while U.S. is adding to its assets in the region shows that kind of deterrence, if you will, and also the fact that these negotiations are happening while the United States is showing its strength. But I don't see that there are major differences between the president and the Israeli prime minister, in the sense that both of them, as far as we are talking about Iran, of course, are having the same end, which is Iran has no nuclear military project, has zero uranium enrichment, no ballistic missiles, which can impose danger and threat to the neighbors in the Middle East, and also cutting Iran's support to its proxies in the region. I don't see any major differences between the positions of the United States and the Israeli leadership in that sense.
However, you heard Jinder there talking about, or brought up the idea that there is pressure on Trump, basically, not just from the Americans, but also from regional allies, not just, Israel is not the only ally to the United States. There are other regional allies that are sort of pressuring Trump into not engaging in a war. Do you think this is also something that Trump may be taking into consideration?
Definitely, he's taking this into consideration. President Trump listens very well to his allies in the Middle East, speaking about the Egyptians, the Gulf countries, and the fact that there has been no military action so far shows that he's listening very well to them and he's giving diplomacy its chances. But in my opinion, again, these chances are very limited. If we look at the four conditions, which I just mentioned, the United States is putting forward on the table, and the fact that Iran is not willing to provide any concessions and is willing only to discuss the nuclear project gives us an idea that these negotiations are possibly going nowhere. And we are, in fact, facing the same situation we had last year when we were supposed to go to a sixth round of negotiations between Iran and the United States. And suddenly we had this Israel war on Iran, which was green-lighted, obviously, by the United States. The fact that these negotiations were going nowhere because Iran was not providing any concessions on its ballistic missiles and its nuclear and its uranium enrichment gives us an indication that we are possibly heading in the same direction this year. And the fact that we have all this military assets in the region is telling us that we have at any moment a possibility that a U.S. military strike is going to happen. In my opinion, this is very imminent and it's highly possible. The United States by no means is going to have boots on the ground in Iran, and it's not planning, again, in my opinion, to end the Iranian regime as much as it's imposing that military threat, and the strikes, if they happen, are going to damage the Iranian regime to an extent to force it to concessions, but without having a regime collapse in Tehran. There is no replacement at this stage to the Iranian regime, but there is a will by the United States to force this regime into concessions. And that is, my opinion, the same position which Israel is also coming from. But the differences, in my opinion, is the priority on the agenda. To what I understand from the outcome of those talks which happened in Muscat last week, the United States is willing to start negotiating first the nuclear project, then possibly go to other files like the ballistic missiles, the proxies, in other round negotiation, whereas the Israeli side is pressing the United States to negotiate all these files together in the same time. So we have differences here in priorities, but I don't think that we have differences in the end. Both the United States and the Israeli leadership, they have the same goal, but possibly different methods. And that is what the Israeli Prime Minister wanted to convince President Trump to go to, negotiating everything at the same time and showing more force rather than giving diplomatic work its full chances.
Okay, Ginger, now Trump said that his talks with Netanyahu produced no definitive agreement on how to proceed when it comes to Iran. But negotiations with Tehran seem to be continuing in pursuit of a deal. What does this lack of a clear roadmap, in your opinion, show, when it comes to U.S. strategy? Do you think that this is not actually strategy, that basically the Trump administration is not quite sure how to handle the Tehran file, I suppose?
Ms. Reham, you hit the nail on the head. This shows a lack of strategy, and this shows President Trump's confusion or uncertainty as to how to move forward in a way that makes him come out looking like a winner. And indeed, during the meeting between Trump and Netanyahu, many Americans were wondering, are they really discussing a path to productive negotiations with Iran? Or are they plotting an attack on Iran and using the cover of negotiations for their plans? And what we have seen is that we have gotten details of some of the nuclear discussions. We know that Iran initially was going to agree to ship their 400 kilograms of enriched uranium out of the country to be held by a third party. When Trump was discussing this is when Netanyahu panicked and announced he was rushing to D.C. to talk to Trump. This is because Netanyahu is desperate to stop any negotiations. They do not want talks between America and Iran, because this cuts Israel out. It cuts out their ability to feed America Mossad intelligence and to control the narrative and the story that is being told to Trump. We know other details in that Iran had agreed to reduce enrichment down to 20%. They are discussing inspections. We know this is very risky because the IAEA previously had used inspections to gather intelligence, provide names of scientists to Israel, who then assassinated them. This highlights that any negotiation might involve China and Russia as partners to conduct inspections, much like China and Russia were very big players in making sure the JCPOA went through under Obama. And we also know that President Trump, one of the reasons he is saying he wants diplomatic talks to continue, we want more negotiations next week, is that Trump has no good military options.
But
once again,
you brought up the idea that Netanyahu rushed to Washington because he's not happy about, the negotiation process possibly succeeding. Do you think that we could see a possible scenario where the Israelis reenact, I suppose, what happened in June, whereby they attacked the Iranians and the U.S. would have to interfere?
Yes, and Netanyahu, they are already saying now the nuclear issue is a distraction because they have realized since the war last June, they've realized the effect of Iranian missiles on their Iron Dome. So, and excuse me one moment while I gather my thoughts. Netanyahu does not want the talks to progress. Netanyahu wants to bring the talks to a halt, and he is going to use the issue of ballistic missiles to stop the talks. He wants Trump to insist on dismantling Iran's ballistic missile program. This will leave Iran defenseless against Israeli military aggression, and Netanyahu wants Trump to insist that if Iran does not dismantle their ballistic missile program, then the United States will attack them. And we see the Zionist war hawks in America, such as Lindsey Graham, retired General Jack Keane, Mike Pompeo, saying that a nuclear deal would be a loss because that would leave the regime in place. And the war hawks are saying this is perhaps our greatest opportunity to enact regime change. We know that we are unable to enact regime change, and we know that Israel's goal is actually to destroy the regime, break it apart, break the country into tribal factions. This is evidenced by the fact they had constitutions ready, written up, and prepared for different groups, such as the Baluchis. So they want the breakup of Iran. And they are going to use the ballistic missile issue as a way to derail the talks on the nuclear file. We know that, and your guest made a very important point about Gaza. February 19th is the meeting of the Gaza Board of Peace, their inauguration summit meeting in D.C. Trump has to be mindful of working with our partners with the Board of Peace, as well as working with them on Iran. And we know Netanyahu is going to try the same strategy. He is going to derail the Gaza Board of Peace by insisting that Hamas be disarmed first before there's any other action to derail progress, to derail phase 2 in Gaza, just like he wants to derail the nuclear talks by insisting that the ballistic issue must come first. And we hear in our American press that Israel is threatening Trump if he does not comply. They have as yet unreleased Epstein files that they will use to smear Trump in the media. This is only making Americans angrier. We see that Americans are turning against Israel in even greater numbers. This is a very risky path for Trump. And we do see J.D. Vance's statement in the press recent was very significant. He appears to be backing Trump when he says all options are on the table, but he also said What the Iranian people do with their government is their business. The protesters are their business. We want to focus on the nuclear issue. He is also trying to walk back the ballistic issue. And once again, Trump needs a way out that will save face, that will make it look like he is getting a win out of this. And we must turn to Abbas Araghchi's statements that he can offer Trump a better deal.
Yes.
We must rely on our regional partners, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, to have a unified response to de-escalate tensions and allow Trump a path to move forward in a way that saves face for America and does not lead to greater escalation.
Well, if I just get your take here, now again, Netanyahu is pressing on, Israel's security when it comes to the Iranian missile capabilities. Yet it appears that basically he has secures no U.S. firms, no firm commitment from the U.S. Do you think that this indicates somehow that the Israelis have lost their influence on Trump when it comes to Iran, or is Trump basically trying to delay the inevitable? Because there are reports that basically, even if they do reach a deal, eventually the U.S. will strike Iran.
My my understanding is that, yes, first of all, I would like to build on what my colleague in Washington said. I believe that, yes, there is no clear U.S. strategy towards the negotiations with Iran. But at the same time, while I think there are some differences between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, I think the end is very likely the same, although they have different methods. What I see Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to press on President Trump is the time frame which President Trump is allowing these negotiations to go in. So for Benjamin Netanyahu, the ballistic missiles impose an existential threat to Israel. So the Israeli government doesn't want to allow the Iranian regime much room for negotiations with the United States while it's building, from an Israeli perspective, its ballistic missiles. And according to some Israeli intelligence, Tehran at this moment is able, and it has the capability to build 300 missiles every month, and possibly in a few weeks or in a couple of months, it's able to have more than 1,800 or 2,000 ballistic missiles, which can reach to the deep of Israel. So that imposes a very existential threat to Israel, and it doesn't want to give the time frame that will allow this capability to be rebuilt and reconstituted through the negotiations with the United States. What I understand also, on the other hand, from the U.S. position, according to whether the spokesperson of the White House or the State Department, is that these four conditions which the United States has set forward before the negotiations were started in Muscat, and before that, there is no backing down from these conditions, although there is a flexibility from the U.S. standpoint that we can discuss those things separately. But at least until this moment, I did not hear anybody in the United States administration saying that we are going to give up on discussing the ballistic missiles or the proxies in the region. I see these negotiations happening, but what is the Iranian regime is betting on is more time for negotiations while it rebuilds its capabilities. And that is why I feel that at one stage, both the U.S. and the Israeli government will be convinced that the negotiations will be going nowhere. So a U.S. strike will happen eventually. But when we talk about this U.S. strike, again, in my opinion, this is not going to happen to a severe extent to which we will have a collapse of the Iranian regime. My understanding is that the United States wants to inflict severe damage and pain on the Iranian regime. So at that point, Tehran will not be negotiating its ballistic missiles or its uranium enrichment or even its proxies in the region. Rather, it will be negotiating its own existence. And that is the moment when Washington feels that it can force Tehran into all the concessions it's looking for. Because let's remember, the message coming from Tehran, whether through Larijani or through Arakchi, is saying that we are ready to decrease enrichment to 20%. But let's remember, the JCPOA, which President Trump withdrew from in 2018, had Tehran enriching uranium into 3.67%. So if President Trump withdrew from that peace plan, or let's say that plan, because he felt it's weak and it's not good and it's not fair for the United States, do we accept him now to go back to this plan with better conditions to Iran when it's weaker? I don't think so.
Yeah, thank you so much. But unfortunately, we're out of time. That was Fadi Hanani, a senior fellow at the National Council on U.S.-Arab Relations, and Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst. Thank you both for joining me here, and thank you for your insights. This brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.